What we're doing is we're using the lathe to produce a very, very small radius piece of trim molding. And these pieces exist everywhere throughout the house. They frame most of the wainscoting paneling, as well as all of the panels on the Palladian window. And many of these pieces are simply missing. They have fallen off the trim work and been swept up over the years, so they don't even exist anymore. When I noticed how many of these parts existed throughout the house, I realized that they must have had a simple, efficient way to produce them. And the more I thought about it, I realized that it had to be a lathe turning, and that they must have made a knife, a specific tool that had the profile already ground into it. So what I did was I took an old piece of file steel, which is very hard steel, and I ground the bead into it. And the bead is then transferred to the molding part while the lathe is turning. So what we did was we did some tool making in the process of doing this. We actually produced a tool that could replicate the detail over and over again, and I'm quite sure this is how they did it in 1801. All right, what we're going to do here is just a small procedure, and we're going to simply free it from the turning block. Now the next thing is to trace off the end cut lines, and that has to be taken out of a very specific part of this wheel where there is side grain, otherwise the piece will split up into little tiny pieces. So you look at the grain direction and lay it over exactly where it's going to go, and then just make end cut lines so that you have some reference before you start cutting. And then you can fit back from there. After cutting it, you always try to cut it a little bit longer. Now we're just using a coping saw to make these little tiny end cuts. I'm going to cut this one a little long so I have plenty of length, and then I can always fit back from there. And all good carpentry is just about fitting and fitting and fitting and fitting, and patience. And there's the end cuts, and I'm sure that's going to be a little bit too long because I added fully a 1/16 to the piece. And yes, it is. Now I can see exactly how much I need to trim off. And then we'll try fitting it again. And that's much closer. And then that piece will get glued in after the rest of the panel is conserved and repaired. We'll go around and fit pieces in here and here with the same process. Here we have one of the side light panels. These panels frame the area above the side lights. There was a lot of really bad rot in this area because of water that had come through the building, and this panel was really largely decomposed. There wasn't a lot of it left, but what parts were salvageable we did treat chemically and then reconstruct the whole thing. You'll notice that some of this is new wood, but even that material is made from original parts of the building. These small moldings here were turned on a lathe and then applied to the panel. This panel goes right here. It's not ready yet to set in place permanently, but that's where it will reside when we reconstruct all the framing underneath it. And it's a small element, but it just shows how much detail there is in every part of this window.